Welcome back to the Vagabond saga. In episode 3, the hero of this epic crusade, Vagabond, set out on a quest to capture nobles in an effort to end slavery in the wasteland. While she was not strong enough to capture the noble we were after at that time, Slave Mistress Ren, she was successful in capturing a slaver boss from the slave farm in Heng, an achievement in its own regard, however, not a world state-changing achievement. So she disappeared, built herself a training camp, or Vagabond's bandit fight club as it came to be known, got much stronger so that she could get what she had come for in the first place and actually make a difference in this hostile world. This is the story of how Vagabond finally captured and imprisoned Slave Mistress Ren and got her revenge on the slave farm that tried to ruin her. We ended episode 4 on day 26. Strength, toughness, dodge, and martial arts being the focus of this training camp base full of bandits. Vagabond could hold her own pretty good in a fight now, but she was terribly outmatched as the number of hungry bandits infiltrating the camp had grown exponentially by the day. As soon as she'd wake up from one nap, we were right back in the fight, but after so many hits to the gut, she was getting downed pretty easy. We had to strategize. On day 28, I decided to make use of our maze I built and train stealth, which would actually come in clutch during our kidnapping. Due to the sheer amount of bandits in the camp, we were leveling it up like crazy. This was huge for Vagabond, and at night I sent her to mine copper so that when it was light out, she could run back and forth in the maze with a little weight in her inventory to level up strength. This became the pattern. Daytime was for the maze, and nighttime was for the mine. By day 32, the hungry bandits had all been killed or driven off by the Band of Bones, who were a bit tougher. However, Vagabond was also tougher now, and all these guys represented to her was better XP gains, no matter the risk. On day 33, all of the bandits had abandoned the fight club, and I took advantage of this day by filling up a backpack with ore for strength training. I had also opened the fight club to the public, so a few roaming factions like tech hunters and menders popped in and out. At this point, I had leveled strength to 30, toughness to 67, dodge to 29, and martial arts to 13. But the shining star of the stats list was stealth, showing up at a whopping 94. Very big improvements from where we started. And since there were no more bandits in the camp, I turned stealth off to most effectively train in the maze. Day in and day out, we were walking the maze with 3 heavy backpacks. That's when I noticed some crippled homeless hanging out like degenerates outside of my camp. More weight. So Vagabond went and beat the brakes off some cripples and carried one around for weight. For the next 2 days, Vagabond walked the maze hauling around a corpse until I got bored and strength was now at 45, so I said good enough. She had become a pristine picture of power built by a training regiment of strict discipline and patience, and now I knew it was time to exact her revenge on the noble who had scorned her. I arrived at the slave farm, which is located on the border of Heng and Gut. My initial plan was to see if I could free some slaves and maybe have some backup in taking down the camp. Both gates were fully guarded, so I had to be sneakier than a fart in church. I sent Vagabond around the edge of the wall, only to find that she was so inconspicuous, she had somehow seamlessly infiltrated the farm, which made me panic and make her hide. Great, I thought, we're in once again. It was dark, and I made my way over to a building that housed some of the slaves. My first step was to knock out the guards and remove their weapons. Then I began picking locks on prison cages. I hadn't been training lockpicking and was starting to regret that, but I would get enough levels in that skill while we were here that it would never matter again in the future. I was able to free the guys downstairs with ease, but as soon as these dum-dums escaped, the guards were running in after them to recage them. However, I'd become so sneaky that they had no idea I was in the same room as them. I decided to move Vagabond upstairs, and a guard followed right behind her, still unknowing of her presence. She hid in the corner and then attempted to stealth KO him, but she failed and had to fight, and I was blown away at how far her fighting skills had come. She absolutely wailed on this guy until she finally knocked him unconscious and into a coma. So then I went back to picking cage locks. This is where lockpicking started to soar, as these cages were quite difficult to unlock. Most of the slaves were eager to escape, but others were a bit apprehensive. A guard noticed that I had freed a Shek slave and came to fight her, so every time a guard would show up, I'd just knock them out and then loot any weapons, armor, or first aid kits off of them. Anything that would make it easier for the slaves to fight back. And I also made sure to heal the slaves whenever possible. It was becoming Vagabond's great responsibility to care for these victims that she was trying trying so desperately to free. The cycle continued of picking locks even if a slave was hesitant to be freed, and knocking out and looting guards. All the assassination training I'd done in episode 2 was really paying off as I binked them all night-night. Escaped slaves were now helping me as well with freeing the other prisoners. However, this method was becoming rather tedious as they kept getting captured by the guards at a faster and faster rate than what I, as a solo hero, could handle. And even though I was successful in my attempts to knock out the guards, this was unsustainable. This thought was confirmed when several guards regained consciousness in sync and Vagabond had to kung fu fight them all. I knew that I would have to devise another, more efficient liberation plan, so that's when I ran out of the slave house to come up with something better. I ran the guards around for a while and some asshole was shooting at me, which was no bueno. I was able to get her out of the gates, and by the time we did, an alarm had been raised. I ran them around the outskirts of the slave farm for a bit, and by the time I had just one slave boss on me, I decided it was time to fight back. All that strength training and bandit fighting was not for nothing, as Vagabond kicked this dude's puny little butt. I think that fight versus one guy made me a little too ballsy, and I had Vagabond run right up to the gate to where she was met with guards and manhunters ready to beat this enemy of the Empire to a pulp and shackle her up for good. Luckily, I quickly realized that if I drew them away a little bit, then that meant there was no one at the gate anymore, and I ran her ass inside the farm. This time I thought, maybe I can free the guys working the farms right now since it's daytime and they're outside close to the gates. This, naturally, was a very, very bad idea because I just couldn't get the shackles off of them in time before I was surrounded by guards. So I said, fuck it. The only way to take down this camp is to abduct Slave Mistress Ren. Her house was wide open, so with a parade of enemies trailing behind me, I ran inside, to find that she wasn't even home right now. Okay, so where was she? I pushed through all of my assailants and checked in the bakery, where she was also nowhere to be seen. The bar, perhaps? Nope, nowhere in sight. Now I was getting very frustrated. I had been through so much in this slave farm, Vagabond needed to get her get back. I took a look outside and she was right in front of the bar. I couldn't stealth KO her if I couldn't get into stealth, so what was I to do this time? I attempted to attack but was so heavily outnumbered, running was really my only option this time. But I'm afraid it was just too late. They knocked her unconscious and they made the hero of this saga into a United Cities slave. But of course, Vagabond wouldn't let that cage hold her for long. She was too massively skilled, and I still had an arsenal of weapons and healing and all of my armor except for my boots. Nothing was going to hold her back from accomplishing what she set out to do today. She busted out with little effort and then attempted to free more slaves from this rooftop once again. And this time, I was arming them with whatever weapons I could give them. Then, I went for the guys on the first floor whose cages were considerably easier to open. I tried to knock out every guard who intercepted our path and take whatever I could from them. But once again, there was just too many of them, and Vagabond was getting weakened by all the fighting, so she was knocked out and caged once again. Bald, armorless, but not broken of spirit, Vagabond would break free from this prison. All night and into the morning, I hid behind Slave Mistress Ren's house. I had no more patience for trying to rescue slaves individually. We had to burn this whole shit to the ground because now it was personal. My first attempt went poorly, of course, because what hadn't gone poorly so far? I ran her around outside the farm through the edge of gut, and when things cooled off a bit, we went back. I waited outside until the next morning for things to settle down. I knocked out the one guard who was at the gate and went to my hiding spot behind the bar. I sneakily made my way over to the noble house, and after only a couple attempts was able to pick the lock on the door without getting caught. I very carefully closed the door behind me and did a look around. I found Mistress Ren, as well as her samurai guards, upstairs, all asleep. Big mistake on their part. That's when I went in for the KO. Only to fail at the first attempt, raise an alarm, and then try again with success. I knocked that bitch out and picked her ass up, and now it's time to haul ass out of here without getting caught. I made a run for it, and boom, we were home free. I'd done it. I captured the slaver bitch that got me, and now she would suffer the consequences. The entire United Cities would suffer as well, because UC citizens rely on this farming camp for food ever since the Holy Nation destroyed the city and settlements in the Bast region. Without Slave Mistress Ren running the operation, the entire thing will fall to ruin, and UC citizens will become malnourished. Vagabond ran non-stop across a hostile desert to imprison the slave mistress. We ran into a little bit of pain and venge, but nothing too severe. When we neared spring, we were being followed by some drone guards of the Southern Hive. We didn't have time for all that jazz though. When I got to the anti-slaver HQ in spring, I quickly threw Mistress Ren in the prison cage, and the gang had my back against the drone guards. They also did some healing on Vagabond and Mistress Ren. And that was that. I captured Slave Mistress Ren, the slave farm would now begin to crumble, the UC would begin to feel the effects of it, and I had some planning to do, some allies to make. And I know exactly who I'm going to talk to next. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. And thank you so much for all the support I've gotten since I started making videos about one of my favorite video games. If you liked it, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.